Ja. Dude, he does.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass here at the museum, and we're live streaming as well. So we have some guests and visitors watching from virtually as well. We have a very special demonstration for you this morning. We have Eric Hilton, who is our guest artist and designer. He worked, yeah, you can give him a big round of applause.
Thank you.
And he's going to be working with George Kennard to make some of these pieces. So this is a collaborative piece that Eric has carved some designs in, and he'll talk about this a little bit more later. But George Kennard will be the lead gaffer. We've got G. Brian and Chris Rochelle. They're going to be assisting George throughout the process. I'm going to let Eric take it away. We've got Amanda on the monitoring the live stream. So if you have questions at home, let us know. We'll get them to Eric. And if you have questions here, just shout your hand up. But without further ado, here's Eric Hilton.
Hi. Well, it's a real great pleasure to be here after all these years that I've been associated with Steuben. So what I'm going to do to begin with is to show you a few images, if I can bring them out, images that are essential to the artist because we wander around looking at things. And we make decisions as to what might be useful to us or how they can extend our creativity. And thinking of that recent incredible volcanic eruption in Iceland, I took a few photographs. I wasn't actually there, I nicked them off the computer. And there are a few of them that seem so amazing in the way that that volcano was changing the environment around it. In its energy, and flowing pathways were being created from the orifice that was spewing it out onto the landscape and changing the whole structure of the earth. And on another side of it, I've got a wee house on the north coast of Scotland, and I wander around up there when I'm there, and wandering on the beaches where you look at the sand and the rocks and all the creativity or the creation of these over the centuries that have caused them to be. The sand changes its texture, and since sand is an incredible element that we use in the glassmaking process, I discovered this shape on the beach that looked like a dancing figure to me. And I thought, oh, I've got to come back and see that again. Well, of course, it wasn't there, and it never will be there again in the same form. So out of all these ideas, there's a few slides here of a small panel which was sandblasted, which I do a lot of, which you will see the results of in what we're about to make. And this small panel of sandblasting was to just explore the different depths and curvature and convolutions of the glass when you erode into its surface. In the preparation for us working with this, George blew a few blanks, as we call them. So these vases that are there, these vases are, of course, color was clear on the outside. So I sandblasted aspects of design, and these are some photographs of me just working on that my daughter Erin, who's here to prop me up, cutting these particular, as many of us who are in the have been with glass know what this means and how it works. So I'm peeling off parts of the resist, which I stuck to this piece of glass in order to cut it, and then it is then placed inside the bowl in different kinds of design situations. And when that is done, I sandblast it, and you'll see the results before the results of what George has actually done. So that design is on the surface, the inside surface with the color. There's a shot of it just turning, and then we move on. And this is this is the hermit up in the hills, standing at the sandblaster, sandblasting the interior of one of these vases, or one of these bowls, I should say, at the moment. So you can see how moving the handheld gun, as we call it, up and down over the surface of the glass, it gradually erodes it into the kinds of depths that you want to achieve for the future collaboration with George. So that is an example there of a piece that we made a number of years ago that actually was exhibited in St. Petersburg in Florida and in the McClellan Gallery. So that's the results of what happens when George and I have worked together. So George is now proceeding to start the process, and these are the two bowls that are in the hot box at the moment, heating up, are all heated up for the next part of George's actions as he brings them out and starts making a union between the two of them. A kind of marriage, shall we say, only we do hope that this one will work out. George, I'll stop talking for a brief moment because we'll see if George is ready to make a comment or not. Or okay, all right. So George is beginning to marver the piece of glass on the end of the iron before he picks it out of the hot box. As you can see, there's wonderful screens in this in the museum, and you can see everything that goes on when you're viewing it. Okay.
All right. So, Eric, you brought these blanks back a couple of days ago, and we put them in an oven, right?
Yeah.
After Eric sandblasted them, George put them in these ovens, and he brought them up to about 1,000 degrees, really, really slowly over the course of probably 24 hours or more. And right now they're sitting about 1,100.
You took a little extra time to put it in for 36 hours.
36 hours. George said we took a little extra time because they're on the thicker side. And so when we heat glass up, you want it from room temperature to 1,000 degrees. You have to do it really slowly, or else you could cause the glass.
Yeah, we've got to gently coax them to this temperature to alleviate any stress that may be inherent in the composition as it sits there heating in the kiln. Because as you know, the way glass performs, if you heat it up too fast, it's going to crack. This particular composition of glass would crack. And George now is doing a gather over the first one, which is going to then again be marvered on the table. I think it's amazing the way that they control that iron and the way their hands move to do it. It's absolutely fabulous after all these years of control. My admiration is intense to these folks, and I've worked with them for years in teams and together or individually. And like in all the aspects of different forms of art, it's just incredible how the human being can do what it can do, and how it makes observations which it then uses and changes in a creative way, hopefully in a creative way, in order to achieve the vision of the art that the person, the artist, is trying to get through to himself and to others. Because there's an awful lot of things that we do are very personal, and eventually they're shown out into the world, and there's a response, as we all respond to many, many aspects of life. So this is the intriguing part, being fascinated and expanding that fascination in all sorts of different forms.
This little bit of glass is on the end of this pipe. He's going to stick it to the blank that Eric carved that's in the oven, and then they're going to take it out of the 1100 degree oven and introduce it into the 2100 degree heat. And so that process is a very tricky process because that's a...
Yeah, and he's got to be really careful as he does it, so the continuity is achieved in the heating process. And you'll see it in a moment or two when George opens the lid, and he's now going in to pick the bowl up, which you can see he's adjusting the glass as the punty to the bottom of the bowl, and he's lifted it out. Now this is the original design. This is the one that I made up in my studio over a number of. It takes quite a number of hours to make this and sandblast it before we've even started to manipulate it into a total form. Because all of that resist has to be stuck on around the inside or wherever you're going to put it, and then over a number of hours it takes to do this, gently sandblast it into the configurations you want to achieve. So now that that's achieved and it's all going through its processes, George is about to start altering it into what we have vision-wise seen and hope that it's going to work out. Because honestly, sometimes it doesn't quite go the way you had hoped.
So right now you might be able to see when Eric sandblasted the inside, it's a little cloudy and a little, it's got that sandblasted texture. George is going to spend quite a bit of time fire polishing the sandblasted area.
So the sandblasting will become silvery and glisten inside amongst the colored forms that are in the bowl. Of course, you're viewing it through the glory hole from the back. There's this miraculous way that we developed it in the museum, so you can see it from all sides. And as you can see there, turning gently and George controlling it so that symmetrically turning isn't going one way or another. It's just doing it with complete control, which is incredible concerning the weight of this piece on the iron. Now measurements are going to be made to make sure it's exactly the right diameter that it should be for the next part of the process. Now we're hoping as we go through this process and join them, which you'll see certain repetitions going on all the time, it'll end up as an orb. So one will see this ball, which is full of all this, hopefully, visual energy. It's like a feeling of gentleness in the way he turns that iron, with this sort of subdued control. It's just always amazes me. And I mean, when I worked at Steuben for all these years in the blowing room, which actually this used to be, I'm sure there's ghosts walk here, considering the number of years that this was the beating heart of Steuben. And the number of times I've been in this blowing room working with these amazing glass blowers, world-renowned people who were recognized throughout the whole glass industry for their expertise, not only in blowing, but in engraving, in polishing and cutting, and some of the finest engravers that have been in the world are still around. In fact, one of them is one of my best friends, and him and I are still working together. And I believe he's in the audience somewhere at the moment. Him and I meet each other. And like me, he lives outside Corning. I'm living up in the hills near the village of Odessa. And it's funny how people like us migrate into different aspects of the natural world at times in order to seek sort of inspiration, perhaps. Hence the fact when I can, I go over to Scotland and then wander in the mountains and hills that are up there. And as you've seen, the beaches that abound in all their pristine glory, which are incredible because of the environment. Okay, it's coming along beautifully at the moment.
Yeah, that looks beautiful. Love the design.
Yeah, we're hoping for our best. You can see how it's starting to polish the sandblasting, which I don't know if you can see on the screens. Now we're doing a reheat.
So you're going to join these together in the encalmo process, correct?
Sorry?
You're going to join these two cups together in the encalmo process?
Oh yeah,
Nice.
we're gonna join them together, and that is where the union has to be accurate.
So that's, yeah, George is taking
George
this
is
caliper measurement.
about to go and pick the second one up in a moment, and will be remanipulated until the moment comes when the process of joining them together is advantageous to make it work.
And you're going to use this old line-up machine from the Steuben factory?
Yeah,
is that
this
correct?
line-up machine actually it comes from eons ago at Steuben. And I'm sure there are many hands that have touched this as two irons have come together in order to weld two pieces of glass. So it's almost like, it's like something you don't want to do anything with it. You mustn't repair it in any way because it works. I mean, it looks like we all do when we get a bit older, but it still works. I always find it really dramatic when George finally gets to the point where the union's going to take place, and they've got to be dead accurate as they go together. So, in other words, he's working on that over on the other side of the floor. It's being reheated and controlled to keep the actual diameter, the circumference the same as it was to begin with, in order for him to make the other one, which is a different circumference at the moment. When it picks out, he's going to readjust that and then make these measurements that have been made in this manner for goodness knows how long. And then again, there's these traditions which are very deep in the whole experience of working with glass are going to be joined together.
So this time George is picking the second blank up on a blowpipe. So he's opened the hole, and when they join these two cups together, that will become the bubble of the vessel. So he'll be able to blow and inflate the sphere that Eric has designed.
here he goes. He's going to do the pickup. He's getting it right. And out it comes.
So this one has a hole in the top, so he covered that hole with the blowpipe. And they're going to stick this closed bottom grawl to the other grawl, close it up and make a big bow. If they stick them together right away, they can't fire polish the inside. So right now, George is going to spend a little time fire polishing the carvings that Eric has done previously. And then he'll close it up to the same diameter that Chris is taking that measurement here, and then join them together so they'll fit together quite perfectly.
Yeah, George, when he joins them, is going to try and unite the two systems of design together in such a way that they actually visually work. So one hopefully will flow into the other, which is pretty tricky to get it accurately put together that way. So it's not exactly random.
Those of you who are just joining us, we have Eric Hilton, who is an artist and designer and worked at Steuben for many years as an artist and designer. And he's here working with George Kennard. George made some blanks. Eric took them back to his studio, carved some of these beautiful designs into them. And now it's time to pick them back up in the hot shop and put them together into a nice big piece.
So G, I'm going to start to heat it up. Okay. Hey G, keep the lip and bring it out more straight. Not with the curve. No. Paper it so it's nice and straight. Okay.
I know you can't hear this, but George is giving him absolute instructions as to what is going to happen in a minute or two.
So George is the lead gaffer, so you're going to hear him kind of checking in with Eric about the design and checking in with the team about the process. And he wants G. Ryan to make sure that the piece has straight walls. And right now they kind of curve in a little bit. He wants them to be nice and straight. And he's going to make the piece that he has, the walls nice and straight as well. So we had a question from home about what a grawl is. And the grawl that we're using here it's like a blank. And in this case, George made these a few weeks ago, and they have several layers of color. There's 3 layers of color and then a few layers of clear. And so I think he's got some purples and some rubies and a white that will make those rubies and purples pop out. And then he anneals that glass, and then he brings it to Eric at Eric's studio, and Eric is going to lay out some resist, some buttercut.
Yeah, it's a cold working process. So the glass has got to be in a perfect state to be able to be eroded. If it's not, it'll crack. And that can happen, and quite often, if it's not completely annealed properly, it does happen. Now measuring is taking place as to the circumference, the outside diameter of the bowl, which is now going to have to be matched accurately to the bowl that George is now working on in the glory hole.
So the grawl would be the blank. It's kind of like the canvas. You would prepare the canvas for the painting. And in this case, the canvas is a cup because this is a vessel. It's It's got the color applied. It now has the carvings in it. And now they're going to make the final vessel or shape from the growls.
So it always interested me to see the glassmakers with soaking wet pieces of paper manipulating the surface of an incredibly hot piece of glass that they have been doing for centuries.
You all set Jill's right on the bench.
I think the beautiful thing about all this is it's so ancient. It's so profoundly part of the human spirit in this particularly creative field.
So right now, Chris and G. Brian are heating just the lips of these two cups. And they're going to take it over to the lineup machine and join these two together. So this is going to line it right up. This is a pretty intense moment. It's important to keep these turning because they are hot. That was just a price check. They want to make sure that the dress rehearsals. This is making sure that they are going to fit together nicely. George wants to adjust this one just a little bit.
Open up a little bit. I'm going to close this one a little bit. I don't want to round it, but I want to keep it straight.
So George is making final instructions as to the moment when we join them together.
Sometimes you might see glassmakers join these two together at the bench, but these are very heavy pieces and they're very wide, and so that's why this lineup machine is really important for a piece like this.
Yeah, it's all the ghosts of the lineup machine, you see. The mysteries of the lineup machine. No, I'm only saying, I'm making a joke about the fact that so many people have joined glass together on that machine. It's profound.
Yeah.
A little bit warmer than last time, okay?
Yeah, it's tricky. You get one shot. This glass doesn't come apart. Once it's stuck, it's stuck forever.
Yeah, we hope it doesn't. We hope it's not bonded at the wrong moment. It's got to be exactly where it should be, because you can't adjust it that much.
No.
If it's out of kilter, then you're in trouble.
You're in trouble,
you
yeah.
know.
Well, George is in trouble.
Okay.
Line it up.
I hope you can see it on which you can on the screens. It's turning, and he's pushed them together, and now the pressure is on. George is guiding it, controlling it.
Now they're both stuck together, so one of them has to be broken free. He'll cool the constriction line with a few drops of cold water, and with a very light tap, this should pop right off.
And we pray that we'll...
Hey, how about a big round of applause? Awesome.
It's amazing. And George immediately has to take up twice the weight and be able to control it.
Yeah, so this is quite the heavy object. I was just talking with Eric's daughter, Erin. She said about 40 pounds. That's 40 pounds that you're holding way far away from your center of gravity.
Yeah.
And so if you were
turning it.
And turning it, yeah.
And controlling it and moving it. And I always look at the incredible gestures of the glassblower and the way he moves. It's a ballet. an interpretive ballet because it'll change every second, similar but totally changing as he interprets the positioning and the weight and what he's trying to achieve.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so it's important when you're working large like this. You can see he's got a great team. G and Chris both work large glass. And so they know how to handle the material, handle the pipes, and work so they don't get injured. Right now he's cooling off the pipe. These pipes do get hot. And so he just lays it in a trough of cold water, which cools it off. And now they can kind of choke up on the pipe and hold it a little closer to the hotter end.
It's going pretty well. Good. I can see that by the look in your face. It's going pretty well, even though it's covered up with a mask. Yeah, it came together really beautifully, don't you feel? And you know, you're going to just be gentle with it as you readjust it straight down the home stretch.
Friend Steve Bender says, nice work, gentlemen.
Oh, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, so they're going to finish these pieces in about 2 hours today. This is our Bring the Heat demonstration, but they have countless of hours already put into all these pieces. Eric's been carving lots and lots of blanks. George has been making lots of blanks, and now all the hard work is
They had to leave the house because I live on this piece of land which has got trees and, you know, it's a certain amount of acreage, and I think they came up to see if I was still alive. You know, you're not coming down for your tea. No, I'm too busy.
Busy, yeah. So they're going to finish this piece, then Eric's going to do a second slideshow with some video, and they'll make a second piece. So this is going to be a really fun
when
demo.
we get to the second piece, there is another little introduction. So one has to watch the length of time one blethers on about the second introduction, apparently. But I've got some interesting pieces to show you because I've been working with this incredible guy that I met, and he used to work for NASA. And we've been doing these interesting pieces using the creativity that he has worked on for years. Aspects of it are involved in the glass forms that we've been building together. So there's a couple of short movies that just show you this in all its movement, just to give you an idea of directions that we're going in, and then also to move on to the second piece.
So currently they're just making sure that these two cups are really sealed together really nicely, so that when they start to blow this out, it blows out nice and even.
As a perfect orb is the idea.
The perfect orb.
Right.
Nice.
Well, clear a little bit. Just so I do like an emolio.
Work on just these blanks here.
Exactly sure it was so long. Because we had some problems, you see, and I had to go and we had to remake a couple of blanks in order to go and remake it. But I'm sure it must have been about, all in all, let's say I worked on them for about 5 or 6 weeks. And it was due to the fact we had problems, you know, and which gets very aggravating and disappointing at times. But that's the reason that there was certain aspects of what I was doing. The glass didn't like it at times and said, go away. And then you get this sort of feeling that something is wrong when you go and look at it and see a crack and so on. And but George, as often when we've been working together and something has happened like that, he's repaired it beautifully in the blowing room. So it just disappears. He's a miracle worker.
So the piece that was displayed here on the Marver that they made on Monday, we were showing the inside of the platter a few minutes ago. I flipped it over because the outside is the smooth surface and the inside is the card surface, and it does, it's quite a different
Texture.
look
Well,
and
actually,
texture.
I mean, when we're concluding this, I mean, you will be able to see this. The audience will be able to have a look at it. Yeah. Well, the design's holding together nice too. Yeah. Yeah, okay. We're getting close, right. It's heavy.
Like that. It's going to have one mounted to it.
Yeah, we're going to, when the orb is completed, we're going to design another form that will hold it in a certain aspect, which we haven't quite decided on yet. We're going to see how this works out and then make a decision as such as to what we're going to do.
Great.
Before we submit it to a gallery or to the public and see how they feel about it.
Yeah. So George is using that folded up newspaper to cool and shape the outside. He is blowing through the end of the pipe. It's hard to tell, but he's using his foot. We're using a new system because of the mask requirement in the pandemic. We're trying to keep everybody safe and keep the mask on even when we blow glass. So we have this new system, and it's a blow hose hooked up to the end of the pipe. The blow hose is hooked up to compressed air, dialed down to about 1 pound of pressure, which is just like if you were to blow through the end of the pipe. He steps on a foot pedal, and it's inflating this bubble. Usually you'd hear the lead gaffer say
sealed together,
blow or
right?
blow hard, blow soft, but
It's sealed together
he just kind of
beautifully.
steps on that pedal every
Hasn't
now
it?
and then.
Oh yeah, it's looking great, George. How are we doing?
We're doing great.
Oh, we're still within the scope
Only
of time.
36 minutes into the piece. We've got
And we're
lots of
nearly
time
there,
left.
yeah. That gives us room for the next one.
Yeah.
So I can haver on a bit longer then.
Yeah, of course.
Huh.
So they finished with the bottom half of this piece. They're going to flip it around onto a punty. So most blown vessels are flipped around or transferred at least once. And the punty is this little bit of glass on the end of a solid rod that they're going to stick to the bottom of this piece, flip it around, and work on the top or the opening. This is a fairly large piece, and this is quite a small punty, so George is actually going to let this cool off, I think, and gather another layer of glass on top of that, so it's a little beefier and it will hold the weight of this very heavy object. In order to make these really deep carvings that Eric does with the sandblaster, the glass has to be fairly thick. Making these some very heavy pieces. But the thickness of the glass also changes the optics, and so it makes them really quite beautiful. It gives you all those valleys and creases that catch the light so beautifully.
You're going to flash that or come right over? You can flash that down.
It would look very different if it was thinner glass and sandblasted the color away. It would look very flat and wouldn't have that sort of silvery quality. Do we have any questions here at the museum for Eric or the team? No? I know a lot of Eric's friends have showed up today. How many of you used to work at Steuben with Eric? Yeah, awesome. How does it feel to be back in the, they used to call this the blowing room, right?
Is that on? Yeah, I've no doubt when this is all over, they'll have some things to say about me. Probably not very nice at times, because, you know, we've been friends all these years. It's great to joke around together.
Chris, can you hold the shears on that?
All right, so they're gonna remove this from the blowpipe, just like they did over here on the liner machine. A few drops of cold water and a light tap, and this should pop right off. Yep.
I always hold my breath when he does this.
2.
Like that.
And there is our beautiful transfer. That is a really tricky move, especially with something this big and heavy. The temperature, the timing has to be just right. And like Eric was saying, we always get a little nervous because we know what can go terribly wrong, right?
You
We've
bet.
seen it.
Yeah, we've had many a joke together over the years, I'll tell you.
They make it look so easy, but it's quite difficult.
You're gonna put a little jack eye in there?
So they're going to heat up that punty and just kind of define that crease line, because they're going to have to break it again once they want to remove it from the punty. And so they create these crease lines, which are like the thin, weak lines in a chocolate bar that allow you to snap it apart easily. It tells the chocolate or the glass where to break. So he's creating these little crease lines. Otherwise, you have to dump a lot of water on it, which could cause cracks. And so we want to make sure that it has a nice crease.
Guys, joined together, beautiful, George. Incredible. The design just runs us across into each other.
Yeah, we're gonna get the top once it's blown up like this.
I know you are, yeah. We're going to orbitize it, in other words.
That's a nice shot in the back of the glory hole.
It's kind of about 20 minutes too.
Yeah, so I think once he's got this flipped around, now it'll take,
Yeah,
it'll be quick.
hopefully, yeah.
8 minutes, he says. George is pretty accurate. He can give you an estimate that's pretty accurate.
It was 8 minutes and 20 seconds the last time.
They're probably going to remove that little bit of clear that was from the blow punty that they picked the piece up out of the oven with. And that way, some of the material has to be removed anyway, and so they leave a little extra clear on there. They cut that off. That way they don't cut away the the color and the patterned part of the piece.
Let's try that. I'm going to squeeze that front down.
Squeeze that down so it's a little smaller. And I think they talked about, Eric said he wanted to make it a really small opening at the top.
Well, we may not, and we may just leave it as a wee button.
Okay.
Going to see how this last bit shapes, you see, before we make that final decision. And I think it'll be up to George in the end to make that final decision, because he knows the rhythm of what's happening in that piece more than I do. It's amazing how he senses it, you know? It's not just a mechanical process, it's a sensing process and a feeling as he brings it together the way he does.
They're working mostly on the top, but he's got to keep the punty and the bottom of the piece just as warm. Not moving around like the top, but just as warm. They're going to use some more compressed air on a wooden cone. We call this a Sophietta. So even after the glass has been removed from the blowpipe, they can still inflate the glass by using this
It's so
Sophietta.
interesting the way that he's blowing it and enlarging it, and he's not doing it in the old way.
Right, yeah.
I mean, this COVID thing had its big differences happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that Sophietta tool, we used to use a cone, and we'll probably go back to this at some point, but it's a cone-shaped piece hooked to a tube. And either Chris could have blown through the tube, or he could have used a bent Sophietta, and George could have blown through the tube. So they're using the compressed air, and they kind of tap it, because there's a lot of air coming through this one. This one is about 20-30 pounds of pressure. So that's why they're just kind of tapping it. It's a very much higher than the one we use for the blow hose. This one we use for cooling the glass a lot, but this time they're using it for a Sophietta, so they just kind of puff it up gently. See how hot that glass is, the wooden cone of that Sophietta. Catches right on fire. This glass doesn't look too hot, but when you use some of the wooden tools on it, it definitely looks as hot as it is. Right now, Chris is just shielding George's arm from the heat. As George cuts in this little line here that they'll break that clear piece off of. His hand and arm are really close to this massive bit of hot glass, and so a wooden board is a nice shield from the heat. We don't wear gloves. Gloves would be like trying to play a guitar or piano with gloves on. It'd be pretty difficult. So it's nice just to have someone shield your bare hand from the heat. That way you don't have the glove in the way. Now G. Brian's wearing gloves because he's turning this piece of glass that is very heavy. And that can be really tough on the palm of your hand. And so that'll prevent him from getting a lot of blisters or sore hands. It also gives him a nice grip. Okay, they're gonna break that glass once again. So they pulled it nice and thin. We'll add some more of that water. Chris is gonna tap this off. George is gonna tap it off. Now they'll fire polish that sharp edge away. So this color is going to look very different. I believe he's got a gold. Is this a gold and a purple? I think it's going to be just the same colors as this piece here.
So
But right now they're
Back a
hot.
little bit off.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to get back to
I know you are.
Very different.
Yeah. Gotta get a little bit ready.
So those are the colors cold,
Go ahead, give it a little more deep.
and then what you're
More.
seeing is the colors when they're hot. So they look cherry red or orange. But we won't see any of that today.
We're
You'll have to
getting to
check
the
back.
point.
You'll have to check back to the museum's social media. And Amanda is also taking pictures. She'll take some pictures when they come out of the oven as well, so you can see the final cold piece. Unless you come back to the museum, and if it's still here, I don't know when Eric's going to take it to his studio.
Sorry?
I was saying I wasn't sure when you were going to come back for the piece to take it back to your studio and how long it would be here at the museum. So the best way to find the
12:15
picture.
on the 25th of no, I'm joking. No, it's all got to be secret, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what's wrong with the Scots? They make all these secrets.
Well, now you're going to keep us guessing. So they're going to remove the rest of that clear. Now it's just got a little hole. Beautiful form.
Oh, no way.
They'll fire polish that as well. Because hot glass breaks just like cold glass in a sharp edge. The only thing nice about this is it's already hot, so you can take a torch to it and just soften that sharp edge. So we're pretty close to finishing this up. This is going to go into the slow cooling oven. George is probably going to grab a glass of water. Eric's going to do another, Eric Hilton is going to be doing another presentation, slideshow and video. So as we move on to the next piece, once we put this one away, we'll talk about the next piece. So we'll get to hear more about his process and inspiration. Yeah. So they can see they can puff that up again, making this nice and round sphere. It's tricky, very tricky.
Not for the top first.
So George goes in with the jacks to make sure that the opening is round. Chris is on the lip to make sure that the edge is nice and straight, nice and flat. And then they'll cool it off. We can start to see some of that purple coming out as the glass starts to cool a little bit. Where are you going with this one?
We're going to go on that side.
So these pieces have to cool slowly,
The bench still.
and because these are fairly large pieces, I think George likes to put them on for 24 or 36 hours on a slow cooling process. So it's going to start at about 9:05. At that temperature, the glass will stay warm enough that it won't crack and break, but it's cool enough that it won't kind of lose its shape. And And then it will, once we fill it up tonight, we'll send it down to cool slowly. What do you all think so far? We're refining the shape, making sure everything's the right temperature. Probably check in with Eric to make sure that he doesn't want to adjust anything. We've kept everything running nice and even.
Yeah,
I think it's really nice and round.
yeah, that's perfectly right.
Yeah.
Still okay?
Good, man.
Okay. Let's put it to bed.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So now they're going to let it cool off just a little bit. Brian's going to heat the area that they're going to break the glass once again. They got to break it off the punty now. Chris is going to put on a silver suit because he's going to carry this orb and place it into the 910 degree oven. Which means he's got to get the orb close to his body. He's got to stick his arms and face into the oven. And so he needs a little bit of
that way.
protective equipment. Kevlar gloves, a face shield. Close-up of this beautiful design.
Down a little bit, so I don't make cracks on top.
So you don't want to put it into the oven too hot because it could leave a little indentation or pick up some of the fiber fracks that they're going to set it on. But George said he wants to let it cool off just a little bit more. You might be thinking, well, why are they going back in the oven if they want it to cool off a little bit more? They want the kind of the whole thing to cool off evenly. They don't want the outside to get too cold. The inside still be really hot because that's when the glass builds up stress. So they're kind of trying to let it cool slowly, but also keep it warm enough that it's not going to build up that stress. It's going to use a set of shears to crimp that line down, making sure that's where it's going to break a little bit. Better. Okay. A few drops of cold water once again. They put the back of the end of the pipe down. That way when the water drips or kind of comes off the tweezers, it's going to drip back towards the punty and not the finished piece. close it off with a light tap. This is gonna pop right off.
Back on it.
There we go. They'll fire polish the sharp edge. And into our slow cooling oven to cool slowly over a period of time. In the box, George Kennard, Eric Hilton. So George is the lead gaffer. Eric Hilton, the designer and artist. Beautiful collaboration. And don't leave. Eric's gonna start up his next presentation and the next piece here in a minute. There's a piece Eric Hilton designed for Steuben Glass called Innerland.
Are we going to start immediately or in a second? Or?
It's up to you. Yeah, we can start up in a minute. We're going to start up in a minute. If there's any questions, let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. And we'll get started on the next piece here in just a moment. Eric Hilton is with us here today. He was an artist and designer and worked at Steuben for many years. Started his career teaching art in universities before he started designing for Steuben full time. And so we're actually located, our amphitheater is the home now of the old Steuben blowing room. And so this is the area that Eric used to work, design glass. Steuben has moved off the campus to a smaller operation. And we have moved into this space, and this is now the Corning Museum of Glass Amphitheater Hot Shop. We have about an hour left. Eric just stepped out to get some water. He's going to come back and start a nice little slideshow presentation, and George and the team are going to get started on the next piece. Do we have any questions from our online viewers? Taking a brief intermission for those of you watching at home. We have a guest artist, Eric Hilton. He stepped off to get some water. And he's going to be back shortly to start a slideshow presentation of some of his work and inspiration. And the Corning Museum of Glass team, led by George Kennard, today will be making a piece piece in collaboration with Eric Hilton. So this is our Bring the Heat. We do this every other Wednesday. It's live here at the museum, but we're also live streaming at home. And the fun part about these demonstrations is they will be posted to the museum's YouTube page in a few days or weeks, depending on how long it takes to get them up or edited. And so this is a video that you'll be able to check out in the future. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Eric Hilton. Turn on his mic.
Is that on now?
Here we go.
Okay, I get it. I hear it now. Well, once again, thank you again. Repeat being here. That's wonderful. And this second phase of the last, moving on into new realms of possibilities, which I'm going to show you a couple of short videos. And in the audience is a gentleman called James Allen, who is this incredible designer. Worked with him for a few years. He used to work for NASA, and him and I met up, and we got together about ideas. And you're going to see some forms that are culminative of the ideas that we're progressing with into new possibilities. So there's a couple of short movies of this, and one of the pieces is in the Imagine Museum down in St. Petersburg, and another one is in the possession of a collector in Buffalo, New York, and we're working diligently away on some really interesting new ideas, which you're going to see some of the ones that we have already made. So, but to begin with, I just want to refer back to the fact that for 40 odd years, a gentleman called Tom Biegler met me when I was teaching at Alfred University and said, would you like to come along here to Corning and let's talk about things, because he had seen some of my work in the Heller Gallery down in New York. So I went along to Corning and met him, and the result was 40 years of a consultancy with Steuben, working with Steuben, which has been incredible for me and the wonderful, wonderful people that I've worked with. Some of the glass blowers, some of the best in the world, and the camaraderie that went on was just intense. So this was the first piece I did for Steuben, and it's in the collection of the museum, Innerland. And this is a piece made mostly of geometry of cubes and triangles and engraving and blown forms, and they're all together into this inner land of complexity, which is part of us. Our inner lands of complexity as human beings. And this piece is on view in the museum. And it was the first piece I ever made for them. I designed it up in that wee house in the north of Scotland I have, and we made it. I came back down here over to Steuben, and over a few months we put this together. And this other piece, actually why I'm showing you one or two of these, because they're going to become available through Steuben. And this is an orb that originally was made by George here, and I did all the sandblasting, and it looks like a beehive. It looks like a bee's nest, because all these little circles of clear, that was done by cutting resist and then gently sandblasting around and around each of these circles till the sandblasting eroded in to create furrows around each one that began to look like a bee's nest. It hovers on a cone, a crystal cone. And the crystal cone has a hole that runs through it. And the thing hovers in space above that. This one here is a tall prism where a friend of mine actually found this for me. And we took it and I sandblasted, and Max Erlacher, who's here in the audience right now, Max and I cut these punties into the surface of one of the sides of the pyramid. And of course, by interreflection, it being a pyramid, it being a triangle, As you move around the piece, not only does it have nuances of color that come and go through refraction, but the orbs, the hemispheres, the tiny punties dance through the darkness like the universe, like stars in the universe. And this looks like a gigantic column of ice that's risen out of the Arctic to be present on a sea of green, which is actually, once again, a sandblasted panel. Now this one's a lot of fun. It is going to be available too, and it is a cube of glass, a cube of mirrors, in which there is a pyramid. Pyramids are incredibly mysterious features that human beings have created through century after century. And this single pyramid in this glass box goes off to infinity. And no matter which way you look at it, which angle you view it at, you can go around 360 degrees and it keeps moving away from you. It's like a mystery that can never be solved. And perhaps that's what the pyramids symbolize in us as a species. We create these things and they disappear through a time, and we find them and we reinterpret them, and we never know quite the truth behind them. And this work also is going to be around in Steuben, and it is an orb that sits on top of this sagged piece of sand sculpted glass, which has been water jet cut into this disc-like form and sagged in a kiln. And the orb on the top, a form was made with little spikes in it. In the glowing room, we penetrated the gathered orb, we penetrated it, and when it was withdrawn and manipulated, it became a crown. And why I'm showing you this is from the window of the studio when the fall was in full flush, and the leaves and the trees outside were dancing with their colors and reflecting in the sandblasting which is on the panel surface. This deep sandblasting, which I have done a tremendous amount of throughout the years. This other piece about fire, it's fire hovering in a disc. And why I'm showing you this disc is because this started in a strange way. I've done a number of these, and I always wanted the diacrylic material that was embedded in this disc to be able to, it changes of course with the light value. And I've always wanted something else to happen until I met this incredible friend who's become an incredible friend. And him and I got together, and he was excited about what I was doing, and then he showed me what he had been up to. And both of us live away in the hills. And we, of course, didn't know each other until miraculously there was a relationship that caused us to come together. And actually, he's here in the audience, James. And here is a movie that we made about one of the pieces that you're going to see. Okay. Okay, this is the relationship that we began in our first adventures into a number of pieces, which we have been viewed in galleries, and as I said, one's in the Imagine Museum down in St. Petersburg, and the other a collector bought in Buffalo, New York. And we're now working on others. So I want just to show you this next short movie that James actually put together both of these, and it's Tides of Time. Right, that is a series of short movies that James put together of these pieces. The last one there is actually up in the studio right now, and it is to do with pathways through life, the mystery of our pathways through our lives. And it actually shows three, but it's one. And the one is never returns to the same pathway. It always moves into different directions with different systems of action. And it sometimes is incredibly calm and sits there just like it's asleep. And then gradually it comes to life. And it comes to life in all sorts of different forms. And that's the most interesting thing about it. It never goes back to the beginning. It always continues like our life does. It always goes into different pathways. Although we may be in the same pathway, don't kid yourselves, it's never quite the same. The subtleties in it that we suddenly perceive. And wait a minute, where did that come from? Or, my goodness, I never thought of that. And so on. And these pieces are to do with this everlasting movement associated with us as a species on the planet. Now, this work here is going to resemble the one we're about to make, which actually an example of it is lying here that we made the last time round. And it's very exciting because, to me, George and I made this a number of years ago for the first time at a Glass Art Society conference here in Corning. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And when we opened it up and spun it, this incredible thing began to happen as it stretched out. And the depths of the sandblasting in the center held together, whereas the outside went almost on its own route. So the center held and the outside started to rotate. And then after it was completed, I water-jet cut and sandblasted these wavy forms around the outside of it. So its sand sits on a wall, and coming out from it are all these wanderings. It's called the Wanderer. And this was I think it was probably the first piece George and I ever made together. And thank goodness I met him, believe me. Okay, so I think we're going to start working. Thank you. Hi.
All right.
Oh.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay.
We're here in the amphitheater. We've got
I
guest
think it
artists.
looks great. It met together and he manipulated it and it kept itself. It didn't fall apart or anything. It just sat there and glistened. It was beautiful. And I'm praying that this one does the same. I think it would with him working. You sorry, mate? Oh yeah, yeah. There's a number of buddies in the room. All these buddies are along there at the front. Yeah, my buddies, yeah. I do? Oh boy, they're after. Oh, I do? Oh, I'm going to leave the country. Well, wait till they find out. That's great. Nice. Well, I wave them good luck and all that good stuff together. Believe me, all of the buddies. We all have adventures on the same vein together. I tell you.
Yeah, it's fun. We started doing these live stream videos every other Wednesday, and it's fun. We get to connect with our buddies from all over the world. They tune in. And,
yep, it's called Buddy Land.
So those who weren't able to make it here to the museum, George is picking up one of the grawls that Eric has made.
Yeah, the first bowl. Yeah. Sorry.
Looks like it's a little sticky. It's stuck to the shelf, so they give it a little tap. It comes free. Pops it right out of the oven. From 1,000 degrees, now 2,000 degrees. So it's a very tricky maneuver, pulling that out of the 1,000 degree oven and into the reheating oven. So Eric Hilton and George Kennard are working on a collaborative piece. George first started off in the hot shop making these blanks or grawls. So he made these very large, I would say almost a cup, but it's more like a bowl size. These are very large pieces. And so it was that shape. He applied 3 layers of color, several layers of clear glass, and left it nice and thick. They let it cool slowly over a period of time, then brought it to Eric. Eric laid out his resist
You're right.
and all the beautiful designs. And then took it to the sandblaster and carved away all these beautiful designs in the piece. And that's the design work that you're seeing on this grawl. And now they're back in the hot shop. He brought them back to the hot shop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I tried to show you in the previous one, it took a tremendous amount of time to just cut that resist and then adjust it and design, because it was all internal to the bowl. Right. It wasn't like sticking it on the outside. So when you're fiddling around trying to get it to go to the inside in the right configurations, it can be a bit dodgy and difficult to actually get it where you want it. And if you look at that example that we did 2 days ago, you can see that it's retained that geometry in its center and gone wild on its outside.
Yep,
so although it had the same feeling on the second bowl, which the outside represents, it went into this gyration of spinning energy as he did it, but held together almost with the same amount of geometric configuration as the first, which is what we're aiming to do with this one as well.
Nice. It's beautiful. Yeah, so this is
and
the piece.
And you never know exactly what it's going to do.
Right.
I mean, you never know exactly what you're going to get. So you do these sort of mental predictions of what you hope it will be, but it may not be like this at all. So it's discovery all the time. And if we discover it to a feeling of satisfaction, you then decide whether you want to evolve it, repeat it, play with it as a basis for the next idea. So one is linked, in our life as artists, one is linked to the next at all time. I mean, it's not totally in isolation.
No.
You can't live in isolation, so the work isn't in isolation. It's part of that infinity on that piece.
Yeah.
It sits there looking at you, but it then tells you other directions to go in. But you may never find the end of the universe. That's what makes creativity to me so exciting.
Yeah, so if you are just tuning in, a little later on when this YouTube video is posted on our museum's YouTube channel, you'll be able to go back and watch the beginning And in the very beginning, Eric talks a little bit more about how he designed the process
yeah.
and inspiration.
Yeah,
So,
I guess I didn't do that too much here, but I was so, with the timing, I was so wanted to get these processes that James and I are working on, because it's moving. That doesn't mean anything's being forgotten in this process.
No.
This process is part of the whole, as everything is. But we were saying they join together, and perhaps in undiscovered ways at the moment.
join two of these together. They've got two of these bowls in the oven. And so G. Brian's picked up the first one. George is going to pick up the second one, and they're going to join the two together in a process called Encolmo. Eric Hilton is our guest artist and designer today. He worked at Steuben for many years and is with us today to demonstrate these collaborative pieces and talk more about his own artwork today here in the amphitheater at the Corning Museum of Glass. So we're very happy to have him and watch us process. If you're familiar with sandblasted glass, you know it leaves sort of a frosted look on the glass, or an engraved look. By bringing these sandblasted carvings back into the hot shop, you can fire polish that.
Yeah, actually, George and I have been talking about the possibilities of doing more pieces with deeply sandblasted configurations that we can gently edge into other possibilities in the hot shot, using them together, which I think will have hopefully interesting possibilities.
Go with the blowhole.
Yeah.
Last time I got it was last time.
It's so fascinating the way that's polishing that out and retaining itself. You know what I mean? Still retaining its depth. You never quite know how it's going to quite do that till you do it. It's beautiful.
So George picked the first one up on a punty because it is a closed off blank. The next one is going to be the top of the, or the opening of the vessel. And so he's picking it up on a blow punty. So it's got a hole all the way through. And when they join these two together, that'll allow him to create the vessel, which I think in this piece is going to be a platter. So George goes in, he's going to pick this second grawl up. I think each of these weighs about 20 pounds, so they're pretty large pieces of glass. How were they to sandblast? Was it hard lugging them around?
Sorry, once again.
Was it hard to lug these heavy pieces around when you were sandblasting them? Carving them?
Aye, well, you know, they're a wee bit heavy, but they're fine.
Not too bad?
I've handled heavier pieces
Heavier,
than
yeah.
these two bowls.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the one the architectural project I did for the Rockefeller Center in New York, the panels that were sandblasted, we had to get two people to actually help me, and I had to build a sandblast room to do it.
Wow.
So I had to put this special outfit on. I looked like a diver, and we built this sandblast room in a hut at the side of my studio. And I'll never forget, the first time I ever used it, I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. And I'm in there sandblasting, and I thought it was working fine. The air coming to me in this outfit.
Wow.
But it was 92 degrees of heat outside.
Uh-huh.
So I began to get pretty hot in there, okay? So I thought, what can I do? I can't stand this much longer. So what actually happened then was I got a bucket of water and put the tube in the water to cool down the air. And I thought that was just great. Until it started to rain inside the helmet.
Oh no.
Because the humidity factor was coming to bear. So, you know, we go through all these interesting adventures.
Do you still have this walk-in sandblaster?
Well, it's sitting in abeyance at the moment.
Okay.
I've got another sandblaster in the studio that I'm using. Yeah.
Nice.
So that's the way it is at the moment. I don't know
Yeah,
what's
so this
gonna
is a small piece compared to what your work used
I've
to
got
work
a
on.
sandblaster like the same sandblasters as we have in the museum. And this one satisfies me with the kind of scale of the things that I'm working on just now.
Gotcha.
I mean, I may go back to the other, but I'm not sure yet. It depends.
It's really beautiful with the light coming through it.
Isn't that amazing the way that configuration starts to kind of dance optically
Yeah.
as he keeps heating it? George is working on the second one.
So they're gonna open these growls up to the same diameter and then stick them together in that Encalmo process. So he's taking a measurement, George is taking a measurement, and they're gonna check the size. So they're both gonna go to this lineup machine, which is an old machine they used at Steuben. So a lot of pieces of glass have been lined up on this machine. This is going to make sure that these two come together really even.
That looks like we're getting ready. Looks like we're getting ready to
For a size check.
get
Yeah.
the union of the two of them coming together.
Yeah.
Right.
So sometimes they do a size check and like a little dress rehearsal, or they might just stick them together. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
I didn't catch what you said.
I don't know if they're going to just check the size first or if they're going to stick them right together.
Oh, I think they'll probably check the size, but I would assume they would check the size unless they're confident of the exact size of them. Well, it looks like they're going to put them together.
I think, yeah, George might just be using the paper to shrink down one side. They're going for it. Looks like they were close enough. So they're applying pressure, pushing them both together. George was using the paper to kind of shape and pull the sides. And now they're both stuck together. They got to remove one of these pipes. So a few drops of cold water and a light tap, this should pop right off. There we go. How about a big round of applause for a nice,
Yay, George!
a nice lineup, stick, and transfer.
Well,
They make it look so easy.
No, it's the famous lineup. You see, it's all the ghostly hands that have put
All
glass
the old
together on that. They're
glassmakers that
doing
used
it,
to
yeah.
line the glass up.
It's not just them, they've got backing. Yeah. The mystery of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, when Steuben closed, we got to take some of the equipment. So we've got some of the old tools and the old.
When Steuben changed lanes in a way, you guys got a tremendous amount of equipment, which you're now using to great advantage. And when you think of all the audiences that have stood here and seen that piece of equipment, which for goodness knows how long could have lain in a warehouse somewhere and never been
scrapped,
used,
yeah.
but now it's being used. It's
Oh, yeah.
being reborn, as it were, which is incredible.
Yeah. Lots of history.
When the wall starts going together this way, is the same pattern,
On the
are
end.
they lined up together, or?
That's what the attempt is. That's the trick, to line them up so that the continuation runs together. And we're hoping, I'm thinking they are, but when they've cooled down in the box and we'll look at them, we'll know just how close it is. It might be a wee bit out of kilter, or it might be spot on. But he's aiming to try to do it. But the complexity of the distances, you must remember, all these pieces, the design that's coming together is irregular. It's not absolutely a square or a rectangle or whatever. It's irregularly put on the rim of that vessel. So there's no way of absolutely telling exactly where it's going to end up. But remember, there's a fluidity in the melting of them joining together. So what's a little bit out of alignment may actually be satisfactory when they come together. But that's going to be a visual discovery which you can't quite see when you're viewing it there and it's turning all the time, you know? But that's the way I think that would be, yeah.
Going to make sure that these are sealed together. George uses this newspaper pad. This is about 10 sheets of the local newspaper folded up. And he's pushing these two bubbles together, cooling off the surface. And making sure this is sealed up well. Now they've got this on a blowpipe, so they're going to hook up a blow hose. And they can blow and inflate this bubble a little bigger now that it's closed on. This hot torch is allowing him to heat just one certain area, which is that little knob on the end. They're probably going to remove that or clean it up a little bit. Cut that right off.
It's going to be spun out like that disc. That's the way it's going to go. Yeah. So what we're aiming to do is, as you can see in this one, the geometry held together remarkably well, as it was in the bowl, but spun out. But this went random. And the idea is to see what the randomness will be in this when we spin it out, to see the configurations that will develop by the rate of the spin and by the length of time that it's in that process. So something crazy is going to happen. We don't exactly know what, and I think that's the exciting bit about it. Because the first one James and I did these few years ago, we too didn't know what was going to happen, and we were jumping up and down when it happened. It was so incredible, and so was the audience at the time. There was a whole bunch of people in the Glass Art Society conference room where we were holding it, and I guess they thought, oh my goodness, what's happening? And it was beautiful. And that's why it's so valuable to keep doing for us to do these kinds of things.
So they're making this platter or bowl shape right now George is kind of trying to spin this real fast and getting centrifugal force to pull it out so that it's a lower, wider shape instead of really rounded. He can even use that paper to kind of push it back.
It gets so dramatic when he's about to spin it out.
He does, yeah.
Because, you know, it would appear there's only one chance as he spins it.
Oh, yeah.
He's not going back in again.
No.
It's it when he does it.
Yeah, once he spins this platter out, it's not going to fit back in the reheating oven. So he's got one shot.
So it's a one-off shot to make it happen, yeah.
Yeah.
And we hope it's so in alignment that it's even, as it doesn't wobble as it spins,
Right.
in other words.
Any questions from the crowd here at the museum? No? They're all mesmerized.
It's funny, so am I.
Yeah. I love watching these.
Well, it's nice to see
Patterns
all,
and-
it's terrific to see in this weather all these folk who are sitting here, and I do hope they're enjoying themselves, because I think we are.
We are, yeah. It's a great day to be in the hot shop. It's snowing here in Corning in April. Question?
That's quite normal.
How heavy is it? So we were talking earlier, I was talking with Eric and his daughter Erin, that these, the two bowls that they stuck together were about 20 pounds each. So you join them together, it's about 40 pounds. The pipe itself weighs about 8 pounds. And then they're holding it on the end of a stick. So it's like, now that we're talking about snow and it's snowing, it's like, you know, you pick up something 40 pounds close to your center of gravity, it's not going to feel that heavy. But like if you had it out on a snow shovel and you have to keep it turning, it's going to feel a lot heavier. So,
But it's the delicacy of their actions. I mean, they're not, it's the way they hold it and move it,
set it down,
and they control it.
yeah.
And you're thinking, isn't it going to do it? And it may not, but when it does, you breathe that great sigh of relief that
Oh,
it's
yeah.
working, you
Yeah.
know?
So it's, everything is roughly about, I would say it's just under 50 pounds, but it's going to feel a lot heavier than it will tomorrow when it's off the pipe and not moving. Yeah, so when they get it hot enough to move like this, it is also hard to keep it turning even, keep everything centered. So you can see with heat and centrifugal force, they've gotten this to really kind of spread out and become a much lower profile. He's using the newspaper on the tip of the bubble. Chris is shielding George's hand. This glass throws off a lot of heat. And so your hand, when it's that close to the glass, can get pretty uncomfortable.
Sit down, just watch that pop picture stays in the center of it. This light flashes now.
So now they've got the bottom half shaped up. Now it's time to work on the top of the opening. George is going to make the punty, which is the transfer iron, and allow them to flip this whole thing around. Kind of looking at it, trying to find the center. Ryan's got some gloves on. This is one of the few times when we're making something large like this, and it's important to keep the pipe turning, and you don't want your hands to slip. He's got a set of grippy gloves on that will allow him to turn this pipe nice and even. Yeah?
But it's easy. It's off a little bit. The bottom spinner, okay? And then
have seen that little piece on the floor just pop apart. That's what happens to glass when it cools too fast. That had so much, it was the piece that they cut off earlier. And it cooled rapidly out here in the room temperature air, which built up quite a bit of stress, and eventually the stress in that glass is going to cause the whole thing to pop apart. Sometimes it happens that day, sometimes it happens a couple months from now, it could happen whenever, but whenever that stress is decides to let go. That's why we're going to put this into a slow cooling oven to cool slowly overnight or longer,
It's okay, Chris. I'll look
to
at
relieve all that stress and let the whole piece cool even. All right, so they stuck the punty right on there, right on center. They're going to let that cool off a little bit. They're going to add some water, cool that constriction line they made earlier, and break it off of the blowpipe onto the punty, which will flip it around so they can open up the top of this platter. 2 drops of cold water. A light tap. Pops right off, and they'll head right for our reheating oven or glory hole. And I think that deserves a nice big round of applause. Now you can see there's a small hole left behind. This is what they're going to open up the platter. How they're going to open up the platter. So it's just soaking up the heat there at the top. George is looking for a little bit of movement. We can look at the color of the glass, but we can also check to see if it's moving around a little bit. There's a few things we look for. George also knows with his 30 plus years of experience that this reheat is one of the longer reheats because the top of the piece will be the coldest part of the piece. Now he wants it to be the hottest part of the piece, and so he knows that he's got to stay in there a little longer.
It's on. Yeah.
So right now the opening is closed off, but we'll eventually open this right up. It'll just bloom like a flower to make a nice big platter. Alright, he got that nice and hot. You can see it's moving around a little bit. Cool it with the paper. Shape it with the paper. And it's got that little bit of clear on it from when they picked it out of the oven. I'll probably remove a little bit of that. He's going to cut it away. Watch this. He's going to cut through the glass with shears. Just trimming. Clear away. Cutting through glass is pretty easy when it's hot. It's kind of spongy. The hard part is keeping your hand cool enough to make it all the way around before the glass becomes too cold. So this view from behind the oven is going to be really interesting as we start to open this up, because we're going to start to see that pattern be exposed and the light coming through the piece. Chris is shielding George from the heat, but also he's going to use that board on the lip. Yeah, this is going to be a nice, big, beautiful platter. So they're going to slowly increase the size of that opening. Platter like this, so sometimes we just use heat and centrifugal force. So at one point, he's just going to get it nice and hot and start to spin real fast. And it will open wide.
You set those wheels up, please. Set one wheel up, I'll heat it, and then we'll do the second wheel.
We're going to put some of these rollers on the bench here. So when spinning out a platter like this, instead of rolling it back and forth, they're going to put a set of rollers on the bench, and this is going to allow them to just spin in place instead of having to switch directions, roll forward, roll backward. This is just going to allow them to spin in place, to spin it nice and fast.
Come on up. Yeah. Ready, Keith? That one you're on.
Building up the heat. So they've got to build up the heat in the back of the shoulders as well as the lip. The lip is the first thing in the oven, is the last thing out. It's always going to be the hottest part of the piece. And so for this to open up really evenly, the whole thing has to be a nice even temperature. So he spends a little time cooling off the very opening on top, which is the hottest part. Building up the heat towards the back or the shoulders of the platter. Once they get this open to a certain diameter, it's all going to happen pretty quickly. As you can see, they're kind of, everything seems like it's happening pretty slow right now, but things are really going to pick up here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
If anyone's just joining us, we have guest artist Eric Hilton, who is an artist and designer, glass artist and designer, and worked for Steuben for many years. So back here, in the same building, it's no longer Steuben, but the footprint of Steuben. And it's now the amphitheater here for Carnegie Museum Glass, and he's working with museum staffers George Kennard. Collaborative piece. George is doing the hot work, the blowing. Eric has create the finished piece. You'll be able to check out this video again on the museum's YouTube channel in a few days or weeks, depending on how long it takes us to get it up. So check back to the YouTube channel for the museum and you'll be able to rewatch this wonderful video. We're getting really close to building up this heat. You can see the glass started to move around a little bit. It's got that nice orange glow to it. Paddles on the lip, paddles for shields. We'll also be able to check back to our museum's social media sites like Facebook and Instagram to see final shots of this piece once it comes out of the annealing oven. So it's going to look very different. I'm not sure what colors they're using. I think they've got some greens and purples, which right now they look sort of a cherry red. But this will, once it cools off, the color will change quite dramatically. So check back to see still images of the cooled, finished pieces. All right, George asked him if he got the paddles. Once he spins this out, they're going to keep it spinning and use those wooden paddles to make sure that the platter has a beautiful shape. Eric was talking earlier about once they spin this open, it's not going to fit back in the oven. So this is going to be a one-shot deal. They're going to get this so hot, spin it open.
Okay, this is the moment when we're hoping that this is going to spin out the way we want it to. It's going to be.
So
George is writing it to the moment when we do it. I think it's going to be quite a large piece. I hope you can see it on the monitors, but it's beautiful the way the configurations are being polished on the outer part of it. And the geometry is changing its shape constantly as it's beginning to stretch.
Final reheat. Chris is going to put on some protective equipment to carry this piece into the cooling oven. And they're going to get ready to spin this open. The grand finale.
I like these words, the grand finale. Okay, so he's going to withdraw it in a few seconds and then make another decision as to the moment.
Looks for that little wiggle. You can see the edges starting to fold a little bit.
Okay, he's starting to spin it. And here we go. And do it. Uh-oh.
I'll use those wooden boards to contour the shape. There is the beautiful platter. What do you think? remove it from that punchy with that water and into our slow cooling oven. Cool slowly. Leg tap, pops right out.
I'm hoping. Hey, thank you. Thanks for being here. Here's George, is fabulous. Big hand to the whole team. Because without everybody, it wouldn't happen. So I can't thank everybody enough and the privilege of being here amongst them too is tremendous.
A beautiful piece. That's Eric Hilton, everyone. George Kennard, G. Ryan, Chris Rochelle. We'd like to thank you for visiting us here at the museum, for tuning in to our live stream, and check this video out on our YouTube channel in the days to come, and enjoy the rest of your visit. Thanks for coming in.